groups to identify how we embrace different opportunities at the appropriate places on the trail. You know, understanding, and I've said this before, multiple use doesn't mean all uses at the same place at the same time. And but finding ways where we can embrace those alternate uses in certain segments of the trail, or even having parallel segments of trail, which sometimes exist. So yeah, maybe have a horse trail nearby. So anyway, just want to put that out there, and I think from the beginning that's got to be part of the design and outreach of the proposal, and I'm sure it's in here somewhere. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all so much for moving this forward.
Any other comments on the RFP? What's the pleasure of the commission? Do you want to look at this some more before you give an okay? Do you think you want to make some final comments, or are you ready to act on it today?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not a voting member, but I would certainly encourage the group to move forward, and then perhaps you can set up a subcommittee of folks who are involved in looking it over, just over email. The commissioners and the non-voting advisors like myself can look at that as you move forward, but it certainly feels extremely comprehensive, and I realize there's funding constraints, so I think we don't want to slow that down at all, and appreciate the expediency with which you all are operating.
Any suggestions or comments from voting members?
Mr. Chair, I think it is a good idea that if we do vote, that we have that subcommittee to look over what we need to correct the small changes and such. But I also know that it is, you know, the time that it takes to get an RFP out, and I even think waiting till March might be a little, you know, pushing it to the limit. So I think if we acted on it expeditiously, we need to do that.
Well, could I suggest that perhaps we give tentative approval on this, subject to allowing the commissioners to provide any comments or editorial changes that they care to make within a very short period of time?
That'd be excellent.
So would someone care to make a motion on that?
We say move, do, pass in the legislature. You may have different verbiage.
So, yeah, I was going to say, I so move that we vote to move forward on the RFP with the understanding that we have a short time period for review by commissioners.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Could I suggest that we add a time frame there? Could we agree to do this prior to the start of the legislative session? Would that be acceptable? It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you very much for that presentation, Aaron.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, the next item, new business, are some reports from our other work groups. Commissioner Toby Martinez, you made some comments earlier. Did you care to add anything further to that?
Just very brief, Mr. Chairman. I have not really worked very much on moving forward, especially waiting for this meeting to pick up some additional volunteers for the user group. We did have 4 individual user group that signed up in Taos. I've attempted to make contact with all of them, succeeded in connecting with 3 of those user groups. Toner Mitchell is one of the volunteers on that group, and him and I are talking about ways of moving forward, organizing. In particular, anybody that signs up today, please provide an email address and write legibly so we can read what is written down. And I commit to then move forward and probably establish a mailing list on email and start moving forward on communications and see how we pull it together in the near future. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Martinez. we have someone in the audience, Gina Della Russo, who has volunteered to be heading up our resource work group. And Gina, I don't know if you've had time to do much on that, but would you care to give us your perspective?
I have been contemplating what effort would be involved in this, because I didn't have much of a description of what you wanted us to do or anything. But I do have a list of the volunteers, 3 of them that have chosen Commissioner Mitchell and Commissioner Wern. Thank you. I have not contacted anyone yet. I just wanted to make sure I could take it on, truthfully. But I am curious to talk with Aaron Ditter about what products might come out of the plan that would be helpful to the resources work group, and how we could assist in that process as you're going through the planning process. So I will follow up with you, and I hope that we'll have more volunteers to be members of this work group. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Design and Management Work Group, Pete Maddox.
Yep. So we've touched base, our work group, and done preliminary research into the design and management of the Rio Grande Trail. It would be useful to my work group to have specificity from the commission about who the users are. I have a general idea, but in a formalized kind of way. Research reveals, or thought reveals, that not all users want the same trail. You know, bicyclists and horses have different requirements, and yet they have in common that they're going to want a longer stretch of trail than somebody going out, in terms of use, than somebody going out for a walk. And, you know, so formalizing whether we're talking blue trails, whether we're talking, you know, who the multiple users are on this multiple use trail, that'd be great. Otherwise, on the design side of things, there's a lot of work that's already been done. The first 64 miles of trail are in the Rio Grande del Norte National Monument. John Bailey's on that. There was a presentation at the last meeting. Then there's about a 148-mile stretch from Pilar to Belén. That hasn't been paid as much attention to, although it looked like there was a big Ditches with Trails survey done in 2007 that's no longer accessible on the internet, but there are probably people in this room, maybe David Certain, who have access to that, and that included community surveys of people using the ditches. There were 900 responses, and what they wanted out of a trail. The basic consensus was not paved and about 4 feet wide. Best practice is keep grade under 10%, 6% is ideal. So that covers most of that stretch, not all of it, from Pilar to Belén. And then from Belén to Sunland Park, there was a 2008 document. Again, some of the people in this room, I'm sure, have looked at it, but it was a Rio Grande Trail corridor surfaces analysis. And that's not a totally specific document, but it is good in terms of painting a general picture of what you're dealing with. And yeah, on the management side of things, I think management's gonna be okay if we come up with a system for it. The great part about Rio Grande Trail is that New Mexico doesn't have a large population, but almost all of that population lives along the Rio Grande. So in terms of chunking it up into adopting sections, and, you know, people using it as a deterrence for any criminal activity, vandalism, we get into policing and law enforcement. I think that'll take care of itself. But the biggest thing, the 2 big takeaways are that sustainable trails are more economical in the long run. Economical trails are not always sustainable. That's been the history of all the long trails that have been built in the United States to date. So that's the one big point. And the other point is my subcommittee just needs clarity about who the multiple users are in order to move forward. So please sign up.
Pete, would you expand on what you mean by that? Sustainable trails or economical?
Oh, just like if you look at the history of the Appalachian Trail, Pacific Crest Trail, Continental Divide Trail, trails often get built by trail builders who want to do the least work and agencies that want to spend the least amount of money possible. And that makes a lot of sense, but over the long run, it's not necessarily a great idea. So I would just encourage the commission to think long-term. I have no doubt that we're doing that, about, building the best trail you can. That's going to be, for example, the difference between maintaining a trail that is made out of concrete and a trail that is not. The cost of doing so through time is going to be greatly different. And, what grade are you building it at? Because, it might seem like a minor detail to do a 6% grade instead of a 12% grade, but anything over 10% is going to give you trouble down the road. And devil's in the details, basically.
Okay, Commissioner Latham, are you still on the phone?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair.
Okay, you've already discussed website development, but did you want to say anything more about communications?
Well, I think kind of going back to the question and comments about securing names for social media, and kind of further thinking about it, I would actually recommend against doing that, specifically because if our goal is to have social media outreach that will, engage potential trail users and engage the public, between state parks and the Visit New Mexico social media sites, we have a very active and engaged social media presence. If the Rio Grande Trail Commission doesn't have a designated person to constantly keep content flowing through those social media channels, we lose not only, we're taking away from the existing social media outreach that we have, but if we don't constantly churn out new content, then then those efforts are really lost. Facebook has a very bizarre algorithm that if you're not having highly engaging content often, then your posts are not seen. So I would recommend, I just did a quick search on Facebook. There is an existing Rio Grande Trail page that's populated by the Wikipedia content. It gives us the opportunity to edit. So I think to use Facebook as a search engine, it would be appropriate for us to keep content updated on that page, which the Tourism Department is happy to do. But as far as using Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, either to engage stakeholders or get the public involved or excited about the trail, I would recommend that we stick to the New Mexico True social media outreach and the existing state park social media outreach to further promote and market the Rio Grande Trail.
Thank you.
Secretary. And Secretary Latham, this is Representative Steinward. So perhaps it's a little premature to do a Facebook page since we're in the infancy of creating the trail, but perhaps down the road when we reach some sort of critical mass, it would make sense to have, as long as there's someone to staff it and push content and everything, but maybe right now it's just premature to create a spot that basically doesn't have content yet or someone to manage it. Is that right?
Yes, Mr. Chair and Representative, that's accurate. I think I'd probably relate it to if Chagrit State Park had its own Facebook page and the Vietnam Veterans Memorial had its own Facebook page and every single state park in New Mexico had its own social media channels, then you're really splintering your efforts. Whereas the method that we have now, that New Mexico State Parks has a very dynamic social media presence, and they're marketing for all of the state parks. I think that it would make more sense to have the tourism department and state parks be the primary vehicles for promoting the Rio Grande Trail. But until there is a designated staff person, which I think would be, as you mentioned, very premature now, then we can't create enough content that makes social media relevant for the trail. So I think we should use the juggernauts that we currently have to promote the trail and use that. And then as far as communications with stakeholders go, I would say let's keep doing what we're doing through targeted email lists that Kathy is collecting and the communication that we continue to have to engage stakeholders, but not look to social media to do that.
Yes, Commissioner Feldman.
Secretary, Commissioner Feldman, I think when I brought it up earlier, I was really just suggesting grabbing the names that we might use for Rio Grande Trail NM on the different social media platforms so that we have them if we ever need to use them at another time. I definitely wouldn't want to take away from what tourism in New Mexico True is already doing and the state parks. And I definitely wouldn't want to dilute any other efforts or splinter efforts, but I was just suggesting that we go ahead and grab those names if we want to use them in the future, so they wouldn't be taken up by this organization maybe in the other state, and using those for their purposes, just that we have them if we need them.
Right, and Mr. Chair and Commissioner